stand together, we'll never fall. We can make it.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the All Around Growth Podcast. My name is Rob Kaiser, and I am your host. Today is Tuesday, September 16th, 2023, and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of a show where we talk about personal growth and development in all aspects of life, aka all around growth. And in today's show, we are going to revisit the third most popular episode of the show. And for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time or just catching up after a while, for the month of September, we have been revisiting the top 5 episodes in the history of the show over the past 3 years as we approach the 3-year anniversary of the show. For example, last week was episode number 515, titled Exploring Homesteading Preparedness and Community, a Freedom Cell Network update. And what we ended up talking about in that episode was the Freedom Cell Network. And we revisited episode number 114 of that show, which was the number 4 episode in the top 5 episodes of the show. And the week prior to that, we talked about episode 309, titled The Merry-Go-Round of My Blank Life, in an episode titled Merry-Go-Round Reflections from the Road. And I was on the road again, like I oftentimes am, and it was just a reflection on the 5th most popular episode of the show. And today we are going to be reflecting on the 3rd most popular episode of the show. And the 3rd most popular episode of the show was the very first episode, titled An Introduction to the All Around Growth Podcast. That was originally recorded in September 30th of 2020, with the very first episode of the show being recorded a little bit later in October, early October. And I figured the best way to revisit this episode, since it is very brief and it's an introductory episode to what the show was about at that time, what the goals and objectives of the show were when it started, was to simply share it with you right now. It's less than 5 minutes, and that's probably going to be the easiest way to revisit this episode with you together, is to play it right now. So without further ado, let's take a step back in time to September 30th, 2020, and listen to episode 1, an introduction of the All Around Growth Podcast. Hi there. My name is Rob Kaiser, and I'd like to welcome you to the All Around Growth Podcast. First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this introductory episode. During this brief episode, I'm going to explain why I believe this podcast is worth your time. We live in a world where a lot of content is being created. With podcasts alone, there are currently over 1 million shows as of September 2020. There are over 30 million episodes in more than 100 different languages throughout the world. Yet, here we are, connecting with one another, right here, right now. So, why exactly are we connecting? What is it that draws us here together? Maybe you're looking for something you have yet to find, or perhaps you're experiencing some significant transition in your life. You may be unhappy with your day job, or perhaps you even recently got laid off. Maybe you're trying to improve and grow certain relationships in your life, or perhaps you're interested in volunteering or working within your community. Maybe there's an underlying or chronic health issue that impacts your daily life, or perhaps you're simply looking to improve your health and well-being. Most likely, it's a combination of any or maybe even all of those reasons. The bottom line is that we are both interested in personal growth and development, we are both interested in all-around growth. The purpose of this podcast is to share personal experiences of my own all-around growth. Life, business, and spiritual growth through the lens and perspective of your host, Rob Kaiser. So, who am I? To be brief and to the point, I've come to describe myself in the year 2020 as follows. I am a systems-oriented thinker. I am a writer, a horticulturalist, a dreamer. I am an epilepsy warrior, and now I am a podcaster. Based on my life experience to date, I've gone through a fair amount of transition in life. Working and living throughout the country has provided me with a variety of life experience. To balance the variety and transition, there's always been some consistencies in my life. From the age of 13, I've been dealing with a chronic neurological condition known as epilepsy. From the age of 19, I've worked in the green industry, largely within the world of horticulture. For most of my adult life, I've earned a living by working outdoors and working with plants. But most importantly, I've had a strong and supportive network of family and friends by my side. And that's what this is about. Finding a strong and supportive network as we navigate uncharted waters in this life. Some of us may not have grown up with a strong and supportive network. And we are here to be exactly that for one another. We are the community that we've been seeking. Look, sometimes life is hard. You don't have to go it alone. Let's do this and let's grow together. Over the past 10 years, podcasts have been an integral part of my own all-around growth. My primary objective with this podcast is to give back what was so freely given to me. I plan on sharing thoughts, experiences, interviews, and more to assist you on your journey. We're going to discuss finding our passion and learning how to live the life of our dreams. We've got a community that's already working on doing exactly that, and I'd like to invite you to join us. In the next episode, we'll talk about the history of this show and what's in store for the future. All you need to do is subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast player. Again, thank you for listening and being a part of the All Around Growth podcast. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Well, all right, there you have it. Episode 1 from September 30th of 2020, almost 3 years ago. And as I listen to that, I'd like to think that I've stayed true to the original ideas and perspectives of the show, which was to simply share my own personal experiences within the realms of life, business, and spiritual growth, and all-around growth. Over the history of the show, that's changed into a focus on 7 different areas of life: financial, physical, personal development, family, spiritual, social, and career. For those of you who don't know, that 7-layered framework comes from a goal-setting guide that was written and published by Dan Miller, author of the book 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. I will link to the goal-setting guide, and I will link to that book in the show notes of this episode, because that has had a profound impact on the way that I approach life and have done so over the past few years. The community that Dan Miller has created has been an integral component of my own growth and development, and a lot of what I talk about and have shared in the episodes over the past 3 years has come from the work that he's done. At the time of this recording, 3 years ago, and I elaborated on that in the very next episode, episode 2, the history of the show, I had done a little bit of homework in launching the show. I did a little bit of prep work. I recorded 10 episodes to see if it was something that I wanted to do, if it was something that I was actually interested in doing. And that was the initial launch of the project. The project was a 10 episode series, to see if it was something I was interested in doing, to see if there was actually something there. I could certainly do 10 episodes, and that was going to be it. I was going to make a decision after that to see if I wanted to continue doing it, or if I just wanted to do the experiment, complete a project, and say, hey, it was a good experiment. I did the thing, and moving on. I decided at that time that based on the experiences of that 10 episode project that I was going to continue doing it. Like I said in this show, we've got a community that's doing exactly that. We've already begun forming the community that still exists to this day. There's been a lot of change in the show. There's been a lot of change in the community. A lot of people who were involved in the show, in the audience, in the community from the very beginning are no longer with us. A lot of the people that are with us today weren't there from the very beginning. 3 years from now, a lot of the people who are here today won't be active participants in the community itself. The nature of the community has changed. And when I say it's changed in the way that we interact with one another. The show has social media presence on most of the major legacy platforms. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But the place where we are most active, where we most interact with each other, is on Telegram, a newer social media platform, originally designed as a private messaging app. It's taken on a little bit more of a social media feel to it. There's group. It's simply a great app. I like it because I like it for a number of reasons. The chat functionality, the way it interfaces with mobile devices, desktops, PCs, tablets, whatever device that it is that you're using, it works well. It's great for file sharing. It can be used like a personal cloud. That's one way that I use it, so I can easily share files from one device to another. And it simply works well. And there's a great community there within the show. And what's nice is a lot of the people that interact on Telegram in the All Around Growth community, which you can find at t.me/allaroundgrowth, also interact and engage with a number of other communities that many of us are also a part of. So we are a community that is part of a larger community that is part of a larger community, right? So at this point, 3 years after the fact, we are indeed the community that we've been looking for. We were when we started, we continue to be, and we will continue to be exactly that. The community and the nature of it has changed. The nature of the show has changed. The nature of my life has changed, and the experiences that I share and talk about have changed. At the time of that recording in September of 2020, I was still employed full-time at the day job that I had at that time, and I decided to engage in this project based on the series of events that occurred earlier that year. That was the dreaded virus, right? The thing that caused so much confusion and angst within society, and there was a lot of uncertainty inside all of us about what was happening, where we were going as a society. And rather than just wring my hands and wonder, about what was happening, I decided that I was going to do something about it. And the only thing I thought I could do about it was to simply document and share my own experiences about that which I was doing. And like I said, the objective of this show was to share my experience and give back what was so freely given to me. And what was so freely given to me was people doing this exact same thing. Recording podcasts, releasing podcasts, talking about their own experiences, sharing their life, providing a little bit of inspiration and hope. And I'd like to think that over the years, this show on this platform has done exactly that. Provided a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of hope to those out there that wish to change their own life. Because it is possible to do that. I know that because I've done that. I no longer work for the same company that I used to work for. I'm self-employed. I've made some tremendous life changes. I'm sober. I stopped drinking and using mind-altering substances last year. That was becoming problematic in life. So I made some changes. The changes that I've made have had a tremendous impact on my life, and I'm going to continue to make changes. For example, here on the homestead at York Meadow Farm, we are in the process of making changes to the way that the farm business is structured. We're restructuring everything as we continue to grow. I'll talk about that more in future episodes. But life requires change. I used to work for a guy back in the day, back in in the job that I used to work, or at least the company that I used to work for before my last day job. I worked multiple jobs with that company. I managed different territories. I lived and worked in different parts of the country and reported to different people. So while technically I was working for the same employer, I really had multiple jobs, and it felt like I was working multiple jobs because each project and each territory that I covered, I reported to someone different, someone new, and it almost felt like a new job entirely. But my employer and my paycheck came from the same place. But way back when, around 2009, 2010, something like that, I had an old boss. And his name was Ray. And he used to tell me, "Rob, if you're not growing, you're dying." And I used to hate hearing that. If you're not growing, you're dying. He was a Marine, pretty hardcore guy. And oftentimes I hated working for him because he was such a kind of a hard-line, hard-nosed guy. But I learned a lot from him. And I find myself saying a lot of the things that he said at that time now. For example, if you're not growing, you're dying. I firmly believe this. Because if you're not, you're not. I mean, if nothing changes, right? We can't go through life doing the same things we've always done and expecting to get something different. If we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. So if we want to change, we've got to change. If we want to do something different, if we want to get something different, we've got to do something different. The only problem is change is hard. Change requires a bit of reprogramming, a bit of repatterning. And there's something going on right now. For those of you who are subscribers to the show, for the month of September, you've also seen on each day, new episodes being dropped that are part of a 30-day challenge. The strangest secret. This ultimately comes from the 48 Days community. And they started this 30-day challenge, and I decided that I was going to replicate that, again, giving full credit to the 48 Days community. In each of those episodes, it simply says we're on, like today, for example, day 16 of 30, the strangest secret challenge. If you want to participate in this challenge, sign up at 48days.com/secret. Join the challenge. Participate in their Facebook community. Everything that I've shared throughout the history of this show, I've tried to give credit where credit is due. Because the reality is, most of what I talk about is not something that I've created. It's not something that I'm responsible for. It's simply something that I'm sharing with you. I am but a messenger. There's very little in this life that I've created myself of my own accord. And I think that's true for most of us out there. You know, no matter who we listen to, no matter what content we consume, very little of it is actually original content, right? We all take inspiration from something. We all take inspiration from someone. We all take information in, and whatever information we share is simply a version of something that we heard or took in from someone, somewhere, at some point in time. And I very much try to be mindful of that and give credit where credit is due. The reason I mention that is because even though there's a lot of my own personal experiences that I've shared over the past 3 years, a lot of the experiences and a lot of the change and transition that's taken place has been spurred by or encouraged by, it's not necessarily encouraged, but it's been inspired by someone else. And the tools and resources that I've shared have helped provide me with a framework to serve as a springboard so I could actually take action in my own life to engage in the change that I desired. And a lot of that change had to do with altering the mindset that I had. A lot of people, not a lot, but some people, you know, to some people, the change in the perspective, like for example, the strangest secret. For some people, that comes naturally. That thought process comes naturally. Some people don't understand that what Earl Nightingale talks about in The Strangest Secret is not common sense. It's not common sense to me, and maybe it is to you. And if it is, whew, that's impressive. If it is common sense to you, I applaud that and I respect that, because that line of thinking is not something that was native or natural to me. And why that is, I don't know. We had different upbringings. We had different circumstances in life. We had different contributing factors that made us who we are as people. And you know what? That's okay. Regardless of the circumstances in life, regardless of what got us to where we are now, I am certain that there is something within you that you want to change. There are certain elements of your life that you wish were different. And despite the fact that things may be common sense to you that aren't common sense to me, I think that there's a lot of tools and resources in the past that I've talked about, like the strangest secret, for example, that just being one of them because that's current and that's what's going on right now, that those can be implemented and utilized in your own life to engage in whatever change it is that you want. Because if you're anything like me, you may make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. I have a tendency of doing that with just about everything. I make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. And that's why I like to return to something simple like that, which is a recording that was released in the 1950s. And I think it's timeless wisdom. I think it's applicable now, and I think it always will be. That's something that I've listened to routinely in the past. I've spoken about it in the past. I've done episodes about the strangest secret in the past, and I'll likely revisit it again in the future. But getting back to the original recording, there's a lot that's going on right now, at least with regard to the show, that stays true to the original intent and objective of the show. And quite frankly, personally, I'm pleased to revisit this introductory episode, which is the third most popular episode, and hear that I've been consistent with my objectives in the show. For the first year or so of the show, I was also consistent with many of the ways in which I operated in life. Excuse me. And I was consistent in doing so, not necessarily for the first year, but for the first couple of years. I was consistent in doing that until I left my job. And for those of you who aren't aware, I quit my job in May of 2022 and decided to leave and eventually go full-time working with my dad to grow the farm business into what it is today. And what it is today is not what it was in May of 2022, and it's not what it's going to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's always changing and it's always growing. And looking back on this episode from 3 years ago, I can see that that's been the pattern of my own life in its entirety. It's always been changing, it's always been growing, it's always been evolving, and it hasn't always been a constant trajectory of up. There's been some ups, there's been some downs, there's been some peaks, there's been some valleys. There's oftentimes been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But on the other hand, there's also been times where it's been 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But like the old saying of fall down 7 times, stand up 8, I've made more progress than I have regressed. And I don't see that in everyone I encounter. I see a lot of people stagnant in life. And there's a part in the recording of The Strangest Secret where Earl Nightingale says, the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it is conformity. And I see a lot of people who aren't happy with their life because they conform, who aren't happy with their life because They choose to stay in the current set of circumstances where they are because it's more comfortable for them to do so than to change. Now, they'll make reasons about why they do the things that they do. But again, to quote The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, a man is exactly where he wants to be in life because he chooses to be there, whether he'll admit that or not. And I believe that no matter where we are in life, we are there because we want to be there. And that's an uncomfortable thing to come to grips with, and it's an uncomfortable thing to accept. But I think as soon as we understand that and accept that, then we can begin to take steps to make change and live a life that is something resembling all-around growth. And I guess with that said, that's really all I've got for today's episode. It's been fun reflecting on the very first episode, which was recorded almost 3 years ago. And it leaves me feeling excited and encouraged about what the future has in store. You know, one of the things that I did think about before I conclude today's episode was the fact that I mentioned that I was going to do interviews in addition to sharing my own personal experiences and so on and so forth. Now, I've done some. The very first interview that I did was with my parents a couple years ago, and luckily from an audience member out there. Oh, forgive me, I don't remember your name, but you helped me remaster the audio of that recording, and I'm very grateful for that. I gave you a shout out in the episode last year that I re-released on Mom and Dad's anniversary, and I think that I will do that again on Mom and Dad's anniversary this year. The only difference is that Dad's gone, and on Mom and Dad's anniversary, we'll be putting Dad's ashes in the wall at Western Reserve National Cemetery. And we'll be holding a ceremony for him. And so it's going to be a little bit different. But that was the first interview that I did. It seemed appropriate to interview Mom and Dad, who are an integral part and the big reason why the homestead is what the homestead is. They didn't intend to be homesteaders when they bought this property, but they accommodated the dreams that I had and jumped on board with them that we could do something more than what we were doing. And they helped and supported and contributed to and embraced some of the dreams that I had, made them their own, and we've continued to dream and grow and evolve as a family and turn this into something that we never thought it would be. And now we have a tenant farmer, and now we're working with someone else, and we continue to work with other people in our community to bring things in and grow this property and grow our community. And it's a beautiful thing. Speaking of tenant farmer, that was another interview that I did with Cody. And I interviewed my brother. But that's about the extent of the interviews. Interviews were something that was discussed previously in the Telegram group. Again, t.me/allaroundgrowth. If you're not a part of it, then I would definitely encourage you to be a part of it. Join Telegram, join the community, and get involved. But what I was getting at was that we were talking about interviews. And Rachel out there, shout out to Rachel from rewilderlife.com and the Modern Homesteading Podcast, was sharing her experiences with some, I'll just leave it at that, sharing her experiences. If you want to learn what that was all about, then join the group, t.me/allaroundgrowth. But in the back and forth and chatter that was had about her experiences and Wayne's experiences, and Sean was chiming in with some of his experiences, I realized that this would make a great episode. This would make great content, just to have a casual conversation about what it is that we're experiencing, why we think things are the way they are, and how we're dealing with those things. So hopefully, as time goes on, I will figure out a way to do these interviews and get them released in podcast form. Whether or not they're on YouTube, I don't know. I did some experiments with streaming, but that was short-lived, and I'm just sticking with the original way that the show used to be, which was podcast format. I always listened to podcasts over the years because when I was, I could do this, I could learn, I could take in information, I could share experience with the content creator while I was actively doing other things, while I was working, while I was, either on the job or on the homestead or in the garden or whatever the case may be. It was easy for me to listen to you while doing something, staying productive. So I could stay productive learning and absorbing information while staying productive and doing something else. In true permaculture fashion, we'd call that stacking functions. And that's really why I decided to stick with the audio format, because yes, it's great to, sit down and stream and have video content and have exposure in all the ways, but the reality is, that's not me. Yes, would that provide additional opportunities to grow the audience and increase my subscriber base and, be on different platforms? Sure, absolutely. But that's not been the objective with this show, and it never has been. There were times when I dabbled with that and dabbled with ads and, experimented with different things to try and grow the audience, but the objective of the show, as we just listened to, wasn't to turn this into a monetized thing where I could just simply increase my audience base and just have listeners and have subscribers and do this and do that. It's not the point. I don't do this for that. I do this for me. And yeah, maybe that sounds a little bit selfish, but you know what? It is. Because I think there's a level of selfishness that we should all embrace in life. We think of it like putting on an oxygen mask. There's a reason why when we're in a plane and something happens, we're encouraged to put on our own oxygen mask before we help others put on theirs. We have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. It's simple, but it's not easy. And that's what I'm doing with this show. I'm sharing my own experiences and the process and the tools and resources that I'm using to grow myself with you so that you can implement them in the way that's best appropriate and suitable for you in the context of your own life. Some of them may work, some of them may not. Some of the episodes I've recorded and released may be applicable and of interest to you. Some of them may not be. That's why we're covering the top 5, because the ones that aren't the top 5 weren't the most popular. The top 2 episodes are really interesting because, twice as many people listened to the second most popular episode, which we're going to talk about next week, which is how I fired my health coach and my financial coach. Twice as many people listened to that than they did this. And the first episode, titled Start a Fire, which was episode number 234, if I'm not mistaken, the first episode had almost 3 times as many listens or downloads as the second most popular episode, and about 3 times as many as this episode. So obviously there's something out there that resonates with more people than not. And there are some episodes that I record and release that don't really go anywhere. They could be considered big flops, but I don't see it that way. I just do what I do because I'm passionate about what it is that I do. And that's the encouragement, and that's kind of the concluding thought that I'll share with you. Do what you do because you're passionate about what it is that you do. And like my dad always used to tell me growing up, do what you love and do it well, and the money will come. It doesn't matter what it is that you do. Do what you love. Do it well, and the money will come. With that, guys, I hope that you enjoyed revisiting the very first episode, the introduction to the show. I look forward to catching you next week when we revisit the second most popular episode. I hope that you have a great week ahead and a great day. God bless. This is Rob Kaiser, and thank you.
The needs are many and answers are few. People turn away, and I wonder why. If I can help somebody, then I want to try. People may think that it's odd that I believe in friendship and love, and truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. I'm an odd fellow. Whoa, whoa. I'm an odd fellow. If we stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference and answer the call. You know the times are wasting every day, and we can help somebody along the way. People may think that it's odd that I believe in friendship and love. Truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. You're an odd